Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today for this panel session on gas, power, and renewables by the Women in Energy Network. This is actually the second in the series of webinar sessions that we're going to be holding as the Women in Energy Network. Before we dive right into it, I'd like to now invite the president of the network, Mrs. Fumi Ogwe, to say some opening statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Rolake. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I'd like to say a few words about the Women in Energy Network. We are an association that's established in 2020 to provide a platform for women that work across the energy value chain to network, build their confidence, and links that will progress their careers and their businesses. So we have a nice mix of women who are in careers and women who are entrepreneurs across the energy sector value chain. And our vision is very simple. It's essentially to become or to be the leading network that promotes the participation and advancement of women in leadership across the energy value chain in support of national development. And this webinar is a series of three that look from upstream, downstream, midstream, gas, power, and is focused on bringing private sector, government, entrepreneurs, women in careers, everyone together to have conversations around how can we close the energy gap. We have today very distinguished panelists, and I'd like to hand you back to Rolake, who will introduce them and get the conversation going. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoy it.
Thank you very much, Fumi. Great to have everybody join us on today's call. My name is Rolake Akinkugbe-Filani. I'm the Managing Director of Energy Inc. Advisors and also Senior Africa Advisor to the Danish Investment Fund, IFU. I spent more than the last 15 years of my life helping to finance and scale businesses across the energy sector value chain and have a background in financial services, consulting, and commodities research. I'm also quite pleased as a WIN founding member to be moderating today's panel. So I'm going to introduce the distinguished panel to everybody. First off, we have Folakemi Soetan, who is the acting CEO of Ikeja Electric. It is the largest privately run distribution company in sub-Saharan Africa, and she oversees the ongoing transformation of Ikeja Electric. She joined as Deputy Commercial Officer and later became COO. And as Chief Commercial Officer, she was very instrumental in ushering in one of the most amazing turnarounds the industry has seen from a commercial point of view. Next up on the panel, we have Alhaji Issa Mohammed Inua, who is an independent non-executive director with Fidelity Bank PLC. Mr. Inua actually retired in 2019 as Chief Operating Officer and Group ED of Corporate Services at NNPC, where he worked for over a decade. While at NNPC, he was seconded to NLNG in 2006 as DMD, and also seconded as DMD of Body Gas Transport Limited, an LNG shipment management company. He has a variety of experience spanning financial services and the oil and gas sector. Next up, we have Tolulope Falola, who is a commercial manager and the regional director for hybrid and energy storage solutions at Sterling & Wilson. She has over 14 years of professional experience acquiring knowledge in the industry, and she currently works with Sterling and Wilson as their lead on renewables and energy storage for the region. She also works as the gender advisory partner for Schneider Electric, who she also worked with in the oil and gas segment over many years. Thank you for joining us. And next on the panel, we have Modele Idiaye, who is the managing director of Eleva Group, a gas distribution and power development company set up to deliver power to the nation through a myriad of projects. Modele has brought over 15 years of industry experience from project finance to project completion and execution. And she successfully raised finance to develop the project to construct the Eleva mini LNG gas processing plant. She also has extensive experience in investment banking. And last but by no means least, we have Mr. Justice Derafaka, who is the technical advisor on gas business and policy implementation to the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources And he also doubles as the project manager for the Nigeria Gas Flare Commercialization Program. As TA, he's responsible for driving the goals behind the National Gas Policy and its implementation. In previous roles, he was at SPDC and SNEPCO, as well as lending his environmental expertise to SNEPCO deep water projects and the Bonga FPSO project. He has also served as an advisor to the Shell companies in Nigeria and Shell Gabon as well. Thank you, all the distinguished panelists. It's fantastic to have you all on this call. So let's examine the topic for today. Nigeria obviously requires domestic energy security. And one of the main challenges we see with the COVID pandemic right now is that falling oil revenues have made the investment in a bankable gas value chain more important than ever, because gas can enable the development of industries and production of goods and services for export beyond oil that would help diversify the economies. But how close are we really to this reality, given this price slump? Will producers of associated gas also feel the pinch? For many years, oil and gas prices were decoupled from each other, and Nigeria has obviously gained ground as a leading exporter of NLNG. Having said that, in a low carbon world with the climate change debate, will the effects of COVID-19 also mean that we end up leapfrogging even past low carbon gas to a world of renewables, with solar PV panels perhaps all over Nigeria, because our local gas infrastructure may not be able to catch up to take advantage of the current climate? These are some of the issues that we would like to explore on this call. I will now invite each of the panelists to give very brief opening statements to shed more light on how they see the pandemic impacting their respective sectors and businesses. I'd like to start with Mr. Issa Inuwa to give us a 3-minute opening statement. Thank you very much, sir. You're welcome.
Okay, Rolake, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, a very good afternoon to you. As Rolake mentioned, what we face today is what I would call a fundamental market disequilibrium, i.e. a dislocation between demand and supply, which is of course reflected in the kind of prices that we are seeing. So if you go across oil and gas, what we're seeing essentially, is in very many instances, incidences of tank tops, falling revenues, and then in operations. But if you go down again to the value chain and go to the finance side, what you see are banks scrambling to have a second look at the exposures to see how they could maintain the integrity of those exposures and the classification of those exposures, while at the same time trying to restructure financial exposures to ensure that they are paid in an orderly manner. And again, if you move on to stock markets, what we have seen is a markdown in the prices of oil and gas companies. So right across the spectrum, from production to transportation to financing and to pricing by stock markets, we see significant changes and significant developments that I think are going to be with us for quite some time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those opening statements, and very interesting to hear the dimension about the impact on the economy and the stock markets. At this point, I'd like to invite Folakemi Soeton to give her opening statements.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Rolake, for that. I hope everyone is keeping safe and we're adhering to social distancing. And more importantly, we are learning different skills at this time. One of the things I have learned is the ability to multitask. So over the last couple of weeks, I have conducted different executive meetings at the same time, having been able to manage the home front. I've listened to a lot of seminars over the last couple of weeks, and some of the things that has been constant is businesses that will do well during this period and businesses that won't do so well. And the utility business is one of those that has come across as businesses that will do well. Unfortunately, in Nigeria at this time, the discos are not necessarily doing well because of the issues with regards metering. As we all know, a lot of our customers are not really metered. However, that said, we are in this situation And our focus as a business is on how we will improve customer satisfaction at this time, increase the power we can to customers who are locked at home at this time, our employee welfare and safety. Our main focus at Ikeja Electric is ensuring that we try and resolve issues that come up during this time of no power. We're also working very closely with Lagos State to ensure that those critical agencies and critical isolation centers are powered up. And we're using technology to implement these things effectively. It's been a very, very learning period for us. We have had many, many opportunities that we're exploring at this time. And it's key to state at this point that a lot of the issues that we ordinarily wouldn't have been able to resolve at this time, we've been able to do that successfully. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those opening words, Folakemi. Next up, would like to ask Rolake Akinkugbe-Filani, who represents the renewables energy business, to give us her opening statements.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Rolake. And so over the past few weeks, we've all seen how COVID-19 has had far-reaching and adverse economic impact on many sectors. Folake rightly mentioned the utility sector, and of course, the renewables is not left out. So we all see that this is a difficult time for us and even the government, because the government is saddled with the immediate priority to save as many lives as possible, to bring this health emergency under control, and topmost to alleviate hardship, the hardship that this shutdown has brought. And of course, embarking on a lot of tasks such as devising stimulus and recovery packages. Now, the renewable energy industry is at the forefront championing clean, affordable, reliable power. And we've seen that the deployment of renewable energy technologies offers an approach for remote healthcare in energy-poor communities. And this has shown to be a key element to the crisis response in healthcare sector at such a time as this. I mean, we've seen how, because of the scalability of renewable energy power sources, we've seen how we've been able to deploy to health centers and diagnostic centers across Nigeria. Now, even with the latest oil price development and the heightened unpredictability of returns on hydrocarbons at this time, it actually makes a business case for renewables even stronger. So of course, current market dynamics, the crude going at as low as $15, and the viability of unconventional gas resources. I believe that this is a defining moment to reduce fossil fuel subsidies towards clean energy without any added social disruption. More than ever, I believe that energy policies and investment decisions must align with the vision. And what is the vision? Future and sustainability. We're not going to change that, even in the midst of these challenges. So I believe that we have very good opportunities for an energy transition in Nigeria to renewable energy technologies, which is currently underway, but we can still ramp it up. We can ramp it up to help to revive industries and to create jobs at this time. And lastly, I just want to say that our response must align with whatever medium and long-term priorities that we have. And the long-term priority of the Nigerian government is to ensure that there's an energy access rate of about 90% by 2030. So that's the 2030 vision. So I believe it's time for everyone, government, policymakers, investors, stakeholders in the energy sector to diversify on an incremental scale and launch an energy transition agenda that would improve Nigeria's energy accessibility, availability, and utilization. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those words, Rolake. I'm now going to ask Modele, who, as a gas entrepreneur, will actually share her experiences in her open statements. Thank you, Modele.
Thanks, Rolake. Hope everyone is also keeping safe. For those of us in the natural gas space, both operations and project development have been impacted gravely by the nation hemorrhaging losses from declining oil demand. both internationally and domestically, the demand for natural gas is going down. Not as rapid as the oil sector, but like oil, it is downwards. We expect to see major losses and larger losses as the summer approaches. But even more tragic in a country like Nigeria is really the hits being taken by new projects and new initiatives, especially given how underdeveloped the sector was to begin with. A key KPI in the industry, in the gas sector, in a year in which was declared to have been the year of gas, is how are the new projects doing? And that has severely been impacted by the lack of traction in some of our investment cases. It's like a domino effect, you know. For a lot of people, the lockdown was only felt about 4 weeks ago, and you feel you've been locked down for 4 weeks. But from an investment perspective, it's been felt since the beginning of the year. Investors are very key players in the capital-intensive natural gas industry, and they are suffering from a shrinking portfolio and liquidity constraints. This is not just from the midterm significance of crashing oil prices, it's also from, I think someone mentioned earlier, stock market volatility due to uncertainty and low visibility in the market. The investors are showing signs of nervousness, hesitation. There's capital raising efforts and reaching financial close has reached to dangerous levels. The challenges have been unprecedented, and the solutions will clearly need to keep the same energy of being novel, innovative, creative, and most importantly, swift. It may not necessarily be about getting back to where we were. It may be about, it will definitely be about a new set of solutions that take us, that are a lot more creative and a lot more sustainable. Natural gas is not a renewable energy, but it is one of the cleanest burning fossil fuels. And one of the main topics during this lockdown has been, as Rolake also mentioned, has been the dependency on our utilities, and 70% of our utilities are supplied by natural gas. And so we can see that this is a time, an awakening for people to understand what the impact is, and an awakening for us to work strongly towards these solutions.
Thank you very much for those words, Module. We're still awaiting Mr. Deferaka to join us. So whilst we await, we'll just proceed to a round of questions with the panel. Perhaps I should go back to Mr. Inuwa. Mr. Inuwa, Nigeria obviously in recent years has become a big exporter of LNG, but we're already seeing that even in the gas space, we're also competing for global market share. So beyond producers in Africa like Angola, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, you have Qatar, you have Japan, Russia, big gas and LNG exporters. What is the risk that our infrastructure in the gas space and our ability to significantly ramp up will actually undermine our desire to maintain our status as a leading gas country?
Okay, so let me answer this in two dimensions. One is around the fundamentals of the market, namely demand and supply. So if you take Nigeria LNG, despite the falling demand at global stage, I think the company can still compete. It is one of the most reliable. It is one of the most available in terms of infrastructure, and it is one of the most competitive LNG companies in the world. So our presence in the market, particularly in the light of all the clauses and contracts that allow for reopening, etc., we are in good stead. Now, if you come back in and say, okay, at the country level, how can we ramp up? I think one of the participants mentioned issues around limitations as to what the environment offers, risk, contract sanctity, infrastructure availability, political risk, etc. So where does that put us overall? Overall, I think we have an opportunity to really ramp up if we can get our house in order. Investments, okay, gas development, gas production is capital intensive. So one of the things that we need to do in creating this environment is to ensure that we have an environment that attracts foreign investors to come in, that attracts technology to come in, and that we create structures in-house that allow us to compete by placing our gas, in such a way that we can capture as much of the market as is possible. So yes, there are opportunities for us to ramp up, but there are things that we need to do in-house and on the outside.
Thank you very much for that perspective. I was very interested to hear the opportunities to ramp up on our infrastructure network. Just perhaps looking at what it takes to even set up a gas business and think about what part of the value chain one can play at, whether the upstream, the midstream, or the downstream. Modele, I was wondering whether you could give us some thoughts on some of your thought process in thinking about tapping into the actual opportunity. What did you see as a gas entrepreneur that was very important to you and you felt was a crucial opportunity for the country?
Thanks, Rolake. So my background is in power, and it was one of the reasons that birthed Deliver, because one of the major issues that we had in the power sector building from a power generation perspective was building capacity, was feedstock. And feedstock is one of those that I felt was more in control of the private sector than some other issues. And so, I mean, that really birthed the concept of coming into natural gas. But when you're coming into natural gas from a commercialization perspective, you're faced with other key stakeholders that have different objectives that are not necessarily aligned with yours. You're faced with the bigger players in terms of getting feed gas, and those are predominantly the IOCs and some domestic oil providers, but they're in the business of oil, you see. So you're like a side piece to their main objective. So you need to create a business case. Every effort to make it a charity industry has not worked. One, because it does have a commercial value, and two, because it does have a real need. When you're talking about, as I mentioned earlier, when you're talking about a sector, for the power sector, that is powered predominantly by gas, the gas to power value chain has never been more important than it is now. With falling oil prices, the challenge is if there's any reason that the oil sector has to scale back on their production of oil, i.e. shutting down wells or even slowing down, this could seriously impact the availability of natural gas, because a lot of the gas we're getting here in Nigeria, because it's been nice to have, has been associated gas. So the investment in non-associated gas definitely must ramp up at this stage. And that investment, unfortunately, it's tied to visibility. If they can't see that there's a market for gas off-takers, then they simply won't make that investment. So that's definitely a huge concern, because the manufacturers that are closing now, the off-takers, the utilities, if they're not presenting a case due to no fault of their own, of seeing a clear sight of progression and of profitability, it's hard for the gas producers at the very beginning of the value chain to make that investment.
Thank you so much for those contributions. I was particularly interested to hear this whole issue of perhaps the gas business operators being sort of on the sidelines and the industry not fully aligning on the different parts of the value chain. It's glad that we now have Mr. Justice Derafaka on the line, and perhaps this is a good time to actually bring you in, Justice. We've heard from Mr. Inuwa on the LNG business and the opportunities for developing local infrastructure. And Modele, as a gas entrepreneur, has actually talked about some of the challenges. I think a lot of the audience would also like to hear from you around what the government actually plans to do going forward and what is working now, perhaps an honest assessment, and what you would like to see or what you're working towards for the future of Nigeria's gas business. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Rolake. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can hear you.
Okay, right. Let me start with government policy aspiration. So, for those of us that are familiar with the National Gas Policy 2017, as approved by the Federal Executive Council, it clearly shows government's aspiration, outlining what government intends to do with our vast, abundant natural resources. I mean, for the records, 200 trillion cubic feet of gas proven and about 600 trillion cubic feet of gas unproven. Now, if you look at Trinidad and Tobago, that has only 11 trillion cubic feet of gas, they've done enormous work in that economy. They've diversified the economy. So what the federal government is looking to achieving with our vast, abundant gas resource is to see how we can use this clean fuel as a fuel of the future, and of course to diversify our economy, and of course play a role as a closest ally to renewables. Now, in terms of implementation, what have we done? The NNPC is running with a whole lot of critical gas projects. We equally have our joint venture partners running with different gas projects as well, to make sure that we open up the gas space. And of course, in another area that we have a big challenge is, of course, gas pricing, infrastructural deficit, and the other issue had to do with what we recently took care of, the National Gas Network Code, which the Honourable Minister, which to us was like the best gift to the oil and gas sector, and of course, investors in that space. So what government is looking to do going forward, again, in line with the national gas policy, is to make sure that we create that enabling environment for businesses to thrive, and of course, to attract more investors. So what we're trying to look at is, if we try to put the right incentives and take care of the fiscals, how much investment are we going to bring into the country that will open up our industries? The fertilizer industry, the agricultural sector, which has the highest GDP in this country, and of course, looking at how we can use the gas that we have in abundance to run our petrochemicals, for them to have the materials for our manufacturing, our plastics, our textiles, clothing. So in the long run, it's all about what government is trying to do to diversify. So we're having that conversation, which of course I will speak to in details. Now, come to COVID-19, what has happened? To some extent, it has slowed down the pace of projects and activities that government intended to run with, again, with joint venture partners and of course, third-party investors. But in the long term, we are trying to reassess our priorities to make sure that in the long term, we have a recovery strategy for these major gas projects to keep coming up, and of course, to benefit the country and of course, the entire populace. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those opening words. And I'm just going to just tease a bit more some of the things you said before we perhaps look at the renewable side and what the DISCOs are doing. You mentioned the fiscals. And of course, we know that for a very long time, cost recovery along the value chain has been a major challenge. And I'm sure all the players here can attest to that. We also have some new policies that are coming up. And one of the things we've often heard the upstream producers complain about is around the PSC fiscals for gas. And there's been a lot of debate around what that would look like. I think this current climate is actually an opportunity to try and tackle some of those issues. So when can we actually expect to see some real headway, especially as it concerns deep water gas or offshore gas with the PSCs and more cost recovery structures along the value chain?
Okay, let me answer it in two strands. The first is that clearly government has identified and has put a position that gas is a critical catalyst to our economic development. Number two, we've had this debate of the PSC gas terms and other fiscals bedeviling the oil and gas sector. So what government is doing now is to once and for all make sure that that child that has had stillbirth for over how many years now is going to be born. I'm talking about the PIB. Now, I want to give you details of the PIB right now, but I can assure you we've looked at all the fiscal issues, the gas PSC terms, and other incentives government is bringing to bear to make sure that we make the oil and gas sector lucrative, attractive for foreign direct investment, and of course, create a stable environment for indigenous companies, which is very important for government.
Okay, so I think, thank you for those views, Mr. Justice Deferaka. At this point, I'm going to bring in Tolulokwe and Folakemi. We've heard a lot about the gas space. As we know, Nigeria is a country that's rich in resources. We have renewables as a potential input into the energy mix. And of course, for those who are closest to the end users of energy, like Folakemi's business, the discos, it's very important to look at how we can tap into all sorts of energy sources. So perhaps starting with Folakemi, beyond gas, how are the discos looking to sort of integrate and engage with other sources of energy to serve the needs of their end users?
Thank you very much, Rolake, for that question. One thing that we are doing at this time is to work very closely with the GENCOs, and of course, even with TCN. It's important that based on the current realities in the market where we have constraints, we look for other ways of servicing our customers and improving the energy that we give them. One of the things we have done as Ikeja Electric is to go into a bilateral arrangement with EGMI, and we have collaborated with TCN. What this has done is we have ring-fenced areas, identified areas and ring-fenced areas, and done the necessary investment that is required to achieve a minimum level of power to that area. And what you've seen is, even though the customers are not paying the regular MITO tariff, they're paying a tariff that is cost reflective, that reflects the investment that has been made. And what this has shown is we are able to still use the existing infrastructure, that is TCN, the same grid, to improve the quality and the quantity of power that our customers are getting. So this is what is critical. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. What we must do is engage all the stakeholders and ensure that the value chain is working. And the reason why I thought it was key to mention that is you can see the difference between the same network, same set of customers, and other customers that have not had the opportunity, or for us to be able to invest as we have done in those areas. You've seen that we've achieved improvement and increase in power, which is critical at this time. And we continue to engage all these stakeholders. What is pleasing to me is at this time, because of the COVID situation, all the stakeholders on the value chain are working together to see how they can collaborate and improve the power that the end users are getting.
Thank you for those perspectives, Folakemi, and I was interested to hear around the MITO tariff structure and the tariff regime. There's been so much talk right now about how stakeholders along the power sector chain can contribute to alleviating some of the impact of COVID-19. I wonder, perhaps, based on, you have your own commercial decisions that you need to make, and you have the sort of imperatives of what is necessary to do in this time. How are you actually struggling to manage that as a disco business? And what are some of the tensions that we're seeing? And how are you engaging with, whether it's the government, the end users, in order to try and meet everybody in the middle, so to speak?
So, to just buttress and continue from where I stopped, the reason why we decided to take that active step of showing that once you run a business on commercial parameters, you would get the end result. And I go back, that singular test of the bilateral deals of ring-fenced areas and how each of the stakeholders. So what has happened is, if you look at it, because we're able to charge a tariff that reflects the investment that was put into that particular venture, you are able to also pay all the stakeholders on the value chain. And they're also able to attract investment from even the banks, because as it is now, all the stakeholders know what to do. But because there are liquidity issues, which is stemmed from the fact that the regulated price or the tariffs that don't consider the commercial parameters, the real commercial parameters, you've seen the constraint is put on the system. So we are pushing with all stakeholders. We're engaging at all levels, at the regulator level, with the GENCOs, with the government. We're doing that very actively. And we will continue to extend this ring fence areas to people that are interested or willing to pay a tariff that reflects the service that they receive. That's our position, and we won't stop until the message is understood by all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rolake. So it's possible that actually bilateral agreements may actually be a big part of the future going forward. Thanks for those. So Tolulokpe, all of this we're talking, you're hearing the discos. Are we all missing a trick? Renewables have been around in Nigeria for a long time. We've had hydropower as a major source of the energy mix for Nigeria. So tell me, in all of these things that you're hearing, where does your sector plug in? And I'm wondering whether you can actually boil it down to practicals. So what does a renewable energy solution look like today in Nigeria, whether you're a residential customer or you're a commercial or an industrial customer? Thank you.
Right, thank you, Rolake. So I would just like to state that I am a firm believer that 24 hours power is possible in Nigeria. You know, we shouldn't give up at this point. I know that it's been a long time coming, and I know that it feels like every time we have a roadmap, you know, we keep asking when are we going to get there. And of course, with the epileptic power supply, and in Nigeria, and the energy access rate, which is at about 45%. So your question was very multidimensional. So I'll just start with what does renewable look like, you know, for different categories of people. So first of all, renewables is I mean, just any energy source that can be renewed every day, you know, that would not run out, is not based on fossil fuel and all that. So of course, hydro and hydropower in Nigeria is one of the largest contributors of energy sources for generation in Nigeria. Now, renewables that we are trying to champion, because we've also seen that hydro projects are quite capital intensive, and it takes a long time to bring them on board. Also, they're not as scalable as other renewable energy sources. Now, one thing that we really enjoy in Nigeria is the sun irradiation, or what everybody, I mean, what laymen would call the sun intensity. So we have very good solar irradiance in Nigeria. We have very good wind speed in some coastal areas and up north. Now, what this would look like for the future of Nigeria to have 24 hours available power is that for rooftop solar panels, you know, so where you can have almost every house having rooftop solar panels, where we can have like solar panels shades in some complexes and large estates, where everyone can actually tap into the renewable energy source. Now, for commercial and industrial clients, we'll be looking at hybrid renewable. Now, hybrid just means that there is a combination of energy sources. So it would be solar and gas, solar, diesel. We'll have to look at the most accessible energy and the cheapest, you know. So when you have a combination of energy sources, you're able to have a cost-effective, you know, energy source at every point in time, meaning that when you wake up in the morning, you know, if the sun is shining, you can definitely use the power of the sun in terms of solar power. And as the sun is going down, you can then bring on your gas generators or gas engines. And then, of course, you have a battery storage. So you have battery storage for night use. So you're able to have a combination of different energy sources and having the economies of scale at every point in time to ensure that you're using the cheapest source. Now, what does this look like in the roadmap for Nigeria? I know that the government is doing a lot. I mean, it's not like we don't have policies and all that. We currently have policies, but maybe where we're lagging behind is the execution, monitoring, and management of these policies, and ensuring that there's an adherence to it. What I see, I mean, from this panel is we have the gas companies here, we have the discos here, and we are from the generating part, which is renewable is actually a generating source, you know. We can easily have a collaboration and a mix of energy source at every point in time. So even despite this whole COVID pandemic and, you know, the prices of conventional fossil fuel being so volatile, this is actually time for us to look at how we can have an hybrid mix, battery energy storage, and see how we can ramp up energy generation for Nigeria from what it currently is. So I don't know if I've been able to touch on and answer most of the questions.
Thank you very much for that perspective. Very, very interesting, and particularly around the hybrid solutions. It actually will require collaboration. But so I'm going to actually start to incorporate some of the questions we're seeing in the Q&A segment. And perhaps this next one, I will also integrate with the question I have for Mr. Inouye. Babafemi is asking that from 2003, we saw projects like Olokola and Brass LNG, which were conceptualized. And his question is around why it takes so long to reach final investment decisions on FID on some of these projects. And I will also add the fact that NLNG Train 7, the FID, actually took quite a long process. We know gas projects are capital intensive. You need long tenures around the financing. You need government support instruments. And maybe this is a question that Justice can pick up after Mr. Inouye has been able to address. What are some of the challenges specifically that cause those delays in investment decisions? Is it the environment, the structure of the project? Is it government support? What are your perspectives?
Okay. Well, from my experience, particularly on NLNG Train 7, there are several reasons why you have delays. One is what I would call shareholder alignment. For a place like Nigeria LNG, where you have 4 or 5 shareholders, there must be an agreement on the part of all of them that they want to do that train and what terms and conditions would drive the development of that additional capacity. The second reason is when you do an LNG project, one of the key assurances that you need to have right from the beginning is availability of gas. Now, to develop feedstock gas, again, it takes a lot of investment. It takes time. So for you to be assured of gas availability in quantity that you require to drive whatever number of millions of tons per annum that you want to produce in LNG, you must be assured that you have gas, and that you have gas that is available, and not only available, but at a cost that will make the economics of the train viable. The second or the third reason why you have delays is that because the capital outlay is quite large, you need to touch base and develop financing structures that are acceptable to investors, to contractors, and to shareholders. But importantly, you also have to look for that source of finance. So you play around with all kinds of structures. Should I do project financing? Should I do some kind of issue some kind of collateralized debt instrument? Should I go for plain vanilla term loan and working capital kind of financing structure, etc.? So the amount of money required, the complexity of structures that have to be built to support that financing also is a reason why it takes time. Fourthly, is that these projects are also complex in terms of engineering. It takes time to agree on the kind of model that you want, the kind of engineering that you want to build into that train. So for example, if you take NLNG Train 7, it's going to be what I call air-cooled. In other words, there will be banks and huge compressors that will cool the gas and liquefy it. In the past, Trains 1, 2, and 3 were water-cooled. That may not have been as efficient as air-cooled or whatever, but you still have to make that choice around what kind of engineering that you need to have, what kind of designs that you need to have in terms of the production. And then finally, what comes readily to my mind is this. You need to engage all the stakeholders. And stakeholders here meaning all the communities. And if you take LNG, the communities are many and varied. It is not just the state government, but it is also the community where the plant is located. You have to negotiate. Then the community where all the pipelines pass from the coast, whether it is coast or on land, from Okrika right to Bonny, Port Harcourt, and so on. So you have to negotiate with all the communities as to what will be the trade-offs. I will put my pipeline. I will do A and B and C for you. And I want you to do 1, 2, 3 for me. So those are the 5 kind of considerations that readily come to my mind. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for those very, very insightful points. I like those 5 points. So clearly gas projects are very complex. And one strand, actually justice, that's often quite important to many of these projects. And when I think from a financing perspective, for instance, maybe there must be some government guarantees elements, some policy support networks. Can you please perhaps shed light on that question on what role government has played in helping to drive some of those projects to FID? And also maybe you can talk to some of the existing gas, I think there are about 7 strategic gas projects that the government is trying to support, like the AKK pipeline, for instance. If you can perhaps respond and share your thoughts.
Okay, are you talking to me or to Justice? Justice is the policy guy, I'm more of a practice guy. So I'll take it. I think the role of government, and he can add some perspectives because I'm sure his knowledge is very current. I can speak to Nigeria LNG Train 7, and I can also speak a little bit about the AKK project. Now, for the LNG Train 7, naturally, because the Federation or the federal government is the largest shareholder through NNPC, that support was crucial. Support in terms of policy direction, support in terms of the provision of political assurances, and support around, again, assurances as to sanctity of contracts and stability in terms of fiscals, particularly. So government played a very active role, not only in okaying the project, but also in providing support and assurances in the dimensions that I mentioned, namely political, fiscal, legal, and community. On AKK, the same considerations or the same support is extended. But for AKK, I think maybe because of the strategic nature of the project, the size of the investment that is required, and also the financing structure, the federal government went one step further, which is something that I cannot remember has ever been done, which is this: to provide sovereign guarantee for the external financing of that project. Okay, and I think that plays to, in fairness to government, that action plays to how government perceives that the strategic importance of that project, not only as a source of transporting energy, but also as a catalyst for investments in power in other areas related to gas, fertilizer, for example, petrochemical industries, along the right of way on which that pipeline is situated. Maybe Justice can come in now and provide perhaps more perspectives.
Yes, please, Justice, go on. Thank you. Thank you, sir. You're on mute, Justice. Justice, you're on mute. Please unmute. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, just to add one more thing before I speak to the critical gas projects. Regarding the LNG, I think, yes, indeed, there were a lot of delays attributed to the signing of the 27 FID. And apart from what Mr. Noah mentioned, another key element is change in technology applications. So just like you mentioned with train 1, 2, 3, so train 6, 7, different, and train 7 now, there are a lot of playing around with different technologies, plus another leg that has to do with the Local Content Act that we need to comply with, because that's very key, that's very important. And what that brings to bear is that it gives our local service providers an opportunity to play in that space in terms of providing the services, logistics, and equally local fabrication of tools and equipment, and boosting capacity building for teaming young and graduates, and of course engineers that will have. Now, on government side, government create a lot of incentives, and if you listen to the body language of during the FID signing, there is a marching order to say, okay, we spent so much time with Train 7. Now we have this template. We've seen, we need to look at what we call an AAR, after action review. Where did we gloss over? Where were the mistakes? How do we now leapfrog to the next train 8, train 9, train 10, up to train 12? So there's a template now, which I believe that will equally resuscitate the other LNG projects. Now, speaking of the 7 critical NNPC gas projects, Those projects, by projection, are supposed to come on stream this year, 2020. Now, I wouldn't want to say, well, COVID-19 tried to slow the pace. To a great extent, yes, but we're not losing focus or target with respect to completion this year. That's like I mentioned earlier on that we are reassessing or reconsidering our priorities, and of course, looking at our project management to see how these critical projects managed under NNPC will definitely eventually come upstream. And overall, the project will bring about 96.3 million cubic feet of gas to bear, and it ranges from different projects from Shell, Seplat, Samabri, and Akri or Ogucha areas in the different OMLs. Now, what this would bring overall is to expand domestic utilization of these gas resources, and it will equally play into providing enough gas for power generation, and of course, spring up industries as it were. So that's what we're looking at, and we're going to look into coming up with, apart from the upstream angle, we're looking at midstream and downstream. So if you recall last year, November, the Honorable Minister of State, Chief Timothy Silva, inaugurated the National Gas Expansion Program. What that program is about doing is to try to catalyze the penetration of the end products like LPG, which is LPG penetration is very poor in the country. So we're looking at deepening our LPG penetration across the country to make sure that we reduce our reliance on PMS, kerosene for cooking, and of course in the local areas where we try to impact negatively on our natural environment, people cutting down trees and woods to use for cooking. So we're trying to see how we can improve on that, plus making sure that we have alternate sources of fueling to run our vehicles. Autogas, LPG, and of course, compressed natural gas to run our vehicles, and they'll become very cheaper. So the whole idea is to distort, if you like, the pricing of petroleum products in the market, and where people say gas is a future, is a fuel of the future, cleaner and the closest ally to renewables. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those insights. And I was actually very glad that you actually mentioned the potential game changer role that gas could play in transportation, but we'll come back to that. And before perhaps I move on to Modele and the other panelists, Justice, there was one question here, which is someone asked, what is the status of the National Gas Master Plan and how does it connect with the current Nigerian gas flare commercialization program? I know even in my own professional career over the last decade, I've heard so many policies: Gas Master Plan, National Gas Master Policy, National Transportation Code on gas, gas flare commercialization program. So can you perhaps shed light on the connection between the two, as this particular audience member has asked?
Okay, so one of the offshoots, let me use the word for lack of word, one of the deliverables of the Gas Master Plan is a network code that was launched in February by the Honorable Minister of State, Petroleum Resources, which is market liberalization for the oil and gas sector that will, of course, attract investors into the country, and of course, create a transparency in terms of access to utilization of gas, paying tariffs, and the quality of gas that goes into the pipeline. Now, one thing that will be coming up in anytime soon here is that because of the launch of the network code by the Honorable Minister of State, it will begin to attract investors where they have that assurance to say, I can invest in pipeline. So if you go to the Department of Petroleum Resources and you're given a catchment area to construct a stretch of pipelines and you feed in your gas, some other person can actually come in to bring in another gas to say, hey, I've got my gas. So all you need to do is to charge a tariff. So there's not going to be any form of discrimination. It's going to be a transparent process in that regard. Now, connection between the Gas Master Plan and the Nigerian Gas Flare Commercialization Program. The Gas Flare Commercialization Program is an offshoot of the National Gas Policy, which is well encapsulated in National Gas Policy. So if we look at Chapter 6 from Section 6.4 in page 68, it tells you that government will collaborate with industry, third-party investors, technology providers, and including the communities and other stakeholders to make sure that we capture these gases that we heated up, be flaring, and convert them to beneficial reuse. So the derivatives that will come from the gas flare commercialization program could be for power utilization, could be for CNG. And when we did the diagnosis and the feasibility of the design of the program, we found out that actually you can actually generate around 3,000 megawatts of electricity with the gas that we flare, which will be wasting over time. And if you harness the gas that we flare, you equally could generate around 600,000 metric tons of LPG that will give clean access, clean energy to 6 million households in the country. Now, in terms of socioeconomic impact, the NGFCP will create around 300,000 direct and indirect jobs. Now, what that means is that there will be a lot of jobs looking at 45 projects that will cut across the entire Niger territory where we flare this gas. Now, to put this into context, I'd like to let you know that the 9 to 10, 11% of the gas that we generate, the associated gas that we generate in this country that is flared, for our power utilization in this country, we use around 750 million scf per day. And on a daily basis in this country, we flare around 888 million scf of gas per day. So what that means is that we can actually double our power generation and utilization. In the domestic industry, we use around 450, 480 million standard cubic of gas, which means we could triple that. But yet we flare this gas for the past 60 years and causing environmental degradation and of course causing a climate change impact. So what the NGFCP is trying to reverse, all these negatives are going to be positive. Positive in terms of revenue generation that will accrue to the federal government around 1.6 to 1.8 billion US dollar per annum. We will create jobs. Now the CO2 that we emit, if we take it to the carbon market, it gives us around 500 million US dollars free money. This is what we've been burning over time for the past 60 years. So this is all of these are offshoot of the national gas policy, the national, which is a framework. So the master plan, which is being managed by NNPC and our joint venture partners, is the implementation phase of the national gas policy, which one leg of it is the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program.
Wow, thank you very much, Justice. I mean, those figures are like music to my ears. I'm hearing about thousands of jobs being created. I'm hearing about 3,000 megawatts of additional power generation. But I want to ask an investor in this gas business, Modele. I mean, you heard those staggering statistics. So actually, clearly, you're in a space that could be quite transformational from an economic impact. One of the listeners was asking what it actually takes to start a gas business. Number one, perhaps you could actually shed a bit of light on that. And secondly, there's a whole huge collection of customers that you as a gas distributor or processor could supply to. Which ones do you consider as displaying the biggest opportunity in terms of the offtake side? Thank you.
Thanks, Rolake. And thanks a lot, Justice. I completely agree with what Justice has mentioned with regards to the NGTNC and the Nigerian Gas Flaring Commercialization Program. Eliva is one of the shortlisted companies in that, and we've gone past the first two stages. And I must say, working with the program has been actually extremely rewarding and extremely easy. I mean, government tend to have a reputation of making things difficult, but actually they've been digitalized in the way in which they've done this process, in the way in which they've disseminated information. So this process, as well as the policies that accompany it, I think definitely contribute to adding confidence in the sector, and the sector needs that confidence from an FDI perspective, which also brings me to Rolake's question, which was speaking on a startup of an SME natural gas commercialization business, which cash is king in this industry because it's extremely capital intensive. As I said, my background was at Siemens in power generation, and we were building power plants which took about $1 billion to set up, you know, here and there. I mean, these were capital intensive projects, but even if some of the projects that fell through the cracks were the more fragmented, smaller projects, and they fell through the cracks quite tragically because the mega scale projects actually take about 7 to 8 years to actually develop. People don't realize how many years. I started in Siemens and met Azura, and I left 2 years after Azura was done, and I was in Siemens for 10 years. So that's 8 years of my career was spent developing one single project. And that's really what it takes. So that's why we're still seeing stagnated power in Nigeria, because we can't copy and paste what other countries have done. Power here is going to grow. Well, power, speaking of power, gas to power will grow in a much more fragmented way. And to support that is why I birthed Eliva, because we're actually dealing in mini LNG. So it's always nice to hear what NLNG are doing, because they're like my great grandfather in terms of size. Eliva is more at the moment scaled to our guaranteed off-taking. And you need those kind of projects. You need those kind of projects that actually they already have their off-taking from the word go. They're tailored to a certain consumer, and then you can scale up, which is where lies, I guess, some of the challenges with the COVID-19. We're wondering now, how is scaling up going to be possible? Is the appetite going to be there? And it will take government and other stakeholders to support the off-takers, even if they don't support the gas commercialization businesses instantly. Once you support the off-takers, and once you provide an enabling environment for the IOCs, and the domestic oil companies, we actually don't have a problem, because on both ends, we're being fed. Also, you mentioned the quality of customers. The quality of customers are extremely important. One of the questions we discussed earlier was on our revenue streams, and our revenue streams are pretty much guaranteed because we go into longer term contracts. And this is only possible because we're dealing with the quality of customers that we deal with, customers with strong balance sheets, strong cash flows. One of our customers is a steel company that's been operating for over 50 years in the country. And so those are the quality of customers that allow you to start up. And you need those customers before you go on your roadshows for funding. The journey definitely starts with funding once you've developed a concept, and your funding narrative needs to be strong. It needs to capture local content, which was also mentioned, and it needs to capture the attention of the IOCs, who will not get involved in this because it's necessarily profitable, but they get involved in it because it's to begin with, rather, it is profitable ultimately. Nobody's doing this for charity. But for a mini LNG company, they get involved in it because they know it's the way forward, and they know that once there's proof of concept, there's profitability in scaling up.
Thank you very much for those insights. Very interested to hear about the offtake, how it's very important as an entrepreneur to have that side sorted, and especially if you're going to go ahead and seek funding. Now, Tolulope, I'm going to come to you. We've had a lot of questions on the scalability and cost efficiency of renewables as a solution, but I'm hearing that gas projects are taking 10 years, 15 years to come on stream. Is renewables actually a quick deployment solution? I mean, what does it take to deploy a project, particularly now in this crisis? I'm hearing a lot of emergency healthcare facilities are being powered up by off-grid solutions. Can you basically talk to whether renewables is really cheaper, as an audience member asked? Are you getting the support you need from a policy side? And what does it actually take to deploy a renewable energy project?
Right, thank you, Rolake. So I would fragment that question into three. The first thing is to understand the investment and to know if it is actually cost effective. And the second is to speak on policy and to see if there are incentives and if there's a policy implementation and the kind of policies that we have, and what would it take to deploy. I think those are the three questions that you just asked. So I think I'll go to the investment end first. And if you look at, as an investor, what are the important parameters to you? I don't think there is any power generation project that would come cheap. So the first thing is we need to look at the capital outlay. Everything that has to involve a major project would have, you have an initial capital outlay that is quite large. So Modelo was speaking about the Azura project and all that. So first of all is the capital outlay, and then there are other parameters. So you look at are we looking at a long-term investor or a short-term investor? Now, if you're going to invest in the power sector, we're looking for long-term investors, people that have a long-term mindset, that are thinking about sustainability. They're looking at ethics. They're looking at SDG. They're looking at not just not just building a power project, but at the end of the day, the impact on the environment, you know, so a lot of parameters will actually come into play. Now, when the sum total of all this actually is your investment decision, is not just from a capital outlay. Now, the reason why a lot of people would think that, would actually perceive that solar project or renewable energy projects are a bit expensive, is because of the initial capital outlay, which is why now technology has been ramped up and we're able to have a mix of sources, which is where hybrid actually comes in, which is where battery storage comes in, where you're able to take the economies of scale and have like a cost-effective power solution where you're using the cheapest energy source. You know, so if I'm going to answer the question, I would say that having a mixture of renewables plus other energy sources, be it gas, be it diesel, would actually be cost competitive on the long run. You know, we're thinking long term, we're thinking off-takers, we're thinking quality of power, affordability, you know, and availability and available power. I don't know if I've answered the first question. The second question is on policy. So today we have quite a number of policy and we have an agenda. So Nigeria has an agenda 30-30, which is to have 90% energy access rate. We have policies, you know, and a lot of draft policies. Some of the policies will be mini grid draft policy. Now mini grids, because if we're looking at electricity and energy access rate in Nigeria, where, I mean, there are two different ways to look at it. We can look at the areas that have grid connection, but they don't have reliable power. And we're also looking at off-grid area, energy poor communities, you know, so we have a lot of policies today addressing each of these areas, you know, areas that we need to ramp up and areas that we need to create new energy sources. The Nigerian government has policies, you know, from NREEP, Nigerian Renewable Energy Act, you know, we have the Vision 3030 and all that, and there are actually incentives embedded in this. We have the needs. Now, what I see is we've not started the implementation of, maybe not saying that hasn't commenced, but we don't have a adherence. We've not started, I mean, maybe the implementation and trying to monitor. Yeah, so there are tax incentives right now for manufacturers of renewable energy equipment in Nigeria to have like a 5-year tax holiday. There are incentives for even importers that offer energy efficient appliances and all that to have like customs and excise duties, rebates and all that. But where is the implementation? That is one area that I would really want stakeholders, policymakers to look at. You know, we can have a lot of reviews and, you know, updates of policies, but when we've not even commenced the implementation, then it means that we have to go back to the drawing board, you know. And then the third thing is, what does the setup of a renewable energy project, what does it really look like? So there are different, you can look at it from a residential project to a commercial and industrial project, and also to a utility scale project where we have the mini grids, and even for you know, companies like the Discos and the Gencos, where we're able to support them. So there are different ways that you can set up. Now for the residential, which is actually the easiest and the most, I mean, it's easy to deploy and is the most scalable. For residential, you'll be looking at things having your solar panels, which are of course accessible in Nigeria, and just having a quick setup and installation in your home, having your rooftop, the solar panels on your rooftop. For industrial scale, it would be a bit more complex because we'll look at what the current energy source will be, the space available in this factory, you know, for rooftop solar. Even if there's no available space, can we have like shade solar? You know, what exactly is the cost of electricity? What exactly are they looking at in terms of infusing renewables, you know, to bring down or to optimize the cost of electricity that they have right now? You know, you have you know, a lot of cabling work. You have a lot of you know, it's quite labor intensive, but the time, I would also look at the time frame to deploy. Now, the renewable energy, is one of the, I mean, if you look at the lead time, if you look at maybe a gas station, a gas project and Renewable, you can have it installed lead time for projects will be about, from installation to commissioning, you can have about maybe 3 weeks, but from the inception of the contract and all that, maybe it will be about a 6 months, a 6 month time frame, which is actually, you have a very good project turnaround if you're looking at about 6 months to bring it from contract signing to commissioning, So
Thank you.
yes, it's actually easy it's quite efficient to ramp up, yes.
Thank you. Within the DISCO. I wondered whether you could speak to some of the opportunities and challenges you're seeing in this current climate as a DISCO business. And also, how are you trying to manage the productivity and the human resource within Ikeja Electric to effectively continue to serve the needs of your customers?
Hello, Rolake, I think you froze for a minute there. Can you repeat the question?
Apologies for that. Yes, someone asked about your reference to the fact that you had done things differently during this COVID-19 lockdown. So I wanted to ask, in terms of your operations, your people, your processes, your cash flow, how are you actually doing things differently? And what are some of perhaps the leadership challenges you're seeing, as well as the opportunities to make a difference? Please unmute yourself, Folakemi.
Thank you, Rolake. So I'll just summarize your questions. You want me to talk about some of the things we're doing during this COVID period, how we're also using leadership skills to manage our operations and the team members. Am I correct?
Yes. Correct. That you're doing differently.
Differently, okay.
Yes,
all right.
Thank you.
So I'll start with what we're doing, or even the leadership style that we deploy during this period. I think one of the most important things a leader must have is ability to listen. And it's important that you are inclusive and you empathize and you leverage on the strengths of your team members at this point in time. And that's one thing I have done personally. We have developed a business continuity plan, which we even developed before the full lockdown. And a lot of those things, or a lot of the ideas came from the team. So I'll go into what we've done. First things first is our focus as Ikeja Electric this year is customer first and technology now. So what does that mean? Our plan is to ensure we improve our customer experience. First is customers want power. That's what they want. But we know that there are limitations that are not within our own control. So the things that are within our control, how do we ensure we get to our customer? How do we ensure that our customers can reach us and we can resolve the issues that is preventing them from having the power that they require? Now let me move that into the COVID period. Because we realize people are at home and they're not going out. Electricity is the most important thing right now for people that are doing Zoom calls, children that are working online. Power is critical and people don't really have cash. So what we've done is we've prioritized improving power availability to all our customers, regardless of the constraints we have. And we've done that by about 40%. We've increased power to all locations by 40%. We've also leveraged on the fact that some of the industrial customers are not operating at this time. And we've wheeled some of that energy that will ordinarily be taken by the industrial customers to our residential customers. Secondly, remember I said customer experience is very critical. And because we don't have a lot of supply for the demands that our customers want, we have increased our channel reach. So our customers can reach us between 80 to 24 hours on various platforms. And we ramped up on that during this COVID period. So before, our working hours were 8 to 8, but we've deployed resources that ordinarily would have been dealing with customers that walk into our offices into manning our various touch points. And we've extended the information, or gathered the information or the requests that are coming in about faults or issues or ability to pay to a platform that tracks every single issue. And what that has done is that you are resolving issues promptly, which is of course tying to customer experience. What we have also done at this time, because we know that people cannot really move, is to put out there the various channels in which people can make payment online or from their houses. We've done a lot of that during this period. Now, remember that we've increased energy this period. And because we also know that because we're being sensitive, we're encouraging our customers to pay, but we have deliberately decided not to disconnect customers at this time. So that has an effect on our operations, but we have not stopped the service of ensuring that customers have power at this time, regardless of the impact on our cash flow. Remember that because we've had to improvise, we've had to get team members to stay in hotels, we've had to pay people extra incentives to ensure that they come to work and they can clear some of the issues that are raised by our customers. It's costing us more. And the cash we're getting from our customers is lower. So for me, it's key that people understand what Ikeja Electric is doing to try and improve service. Secondly, is we know that the isolation centers is very key at this time. And we have relooked at where those isolation centers are based, even general hospitals, and we have reprioritized the energy that we're feeding into those locations. We have been working very closely with Lagos State even at this time, and I must commend the governor and the HC for energy, because they have prioritized. We've looked at what we need to do to reinforce the infrastructure that is supplying these locations, and they have offered to support us finance-wise on trying to quickly improve that infrastructure to increase the power. We are also looking at areas that are underdeveloped and working closely with Lagos State to quickly ring-fence that environment. Remember the bilateral plan I told you, and increase power to those locations to improve their feeling. We've also worked with Lagos State and Sahara as well to distribute food items. We've used some of our resources. We've also leveraged on some of the experience we have from distributing bills in the past to help the government navigate where some of these our customers are, and we've helped them, partnered with them to provide CSR activities. And lastly, I would say technology. So before now, Ikeja Electric's focus, when I say technology now, our focus has been on leveraging on technology to improve efficiency. And we are the first in the sector to have started electronic billing. And what does this mean? This simply means that our customers can get their bills by any means. You can go onto a website, you can get it by SMS, by email. We're the first to do that. And because we started that technology-driven initiative before the COVID, it was easy for us to ensure that customers can get their bills. It also impacted on our operational cost and of course improved the service to the customers. Because before, the customers are saying, I didn't get my bill, I didn't get it on time, I can't plan for it. But with electronic billing, what has happened is that you can get your bill as soon as the bill is generated. And if you have an issue with that bill, you can immediately complain through the different channel points. And I can go on about the different things that we're doing. We've also used technology again at this time. So we've opened up, for example, iServe to ensure that we can reach our customers. Our customers can reach us at any point. The thing is that we're not 100%, but what is driving our operation is to use technology to improve the customer experience, regardless of the limitation in the sector, regardless of the liquidity issues, and doing that without compromising the safety of our team members.
Thank you very much, Folakemi. That was fantastic. Very great to hear about your CSR engagement and some of the things you're doing to drive leadership of the organization. There was a question here specifically directed to you. Is there a plan to allow investors to participate in the production or importation of meters and recharge cards, for instance, to support the efforts in the power sector? I wondered whether you could briefly comment on that.
Oh, yes, I can. So metering is obviously the responsibility of the discos. But of course, because of the liquidity issues I mentioned earlier on, the discos had struggled with covering that metering gap. So the regulator has opened that up to other people through the meter asset provider scheme. And anyone that has access to cash and has the technical know-how to be able to get meters and install same is welcome to help us. Remember when I started my opening remark, one of the things I said that is critical at this time is metering. And the reason why I say metering is because it helps with cash flow, it helps the customer trust in the bill that they are getting. And it improves everybody. So the shareholder is happy, the customer is happy. So please, we welcome anybody that has the capabilities or what is required to be a meter asset provider to help provide metering across the discos, not just Ikeja Electric.
Thank you very much for those submissions. Let's just go back to looking at the gas business again and thinking through some of the issues. Modely, there's a question here, which I think also Justice and maybe Mr. Inoa can also come on and answer in that order. The question is around the fact that most of the gas feed that we have today is associated gas. In other words, a lot of stranded gas or non-associated gas projects, it takes a longer time to produce that, because if there's no oil element, which is a lot quicker to monetize, then there's no real economic incentive. So given what has happened to oil prices, are we going to see a slowdown in gas production? How does that affect your desire to secure feedstock? And to Justice as well, is this a threat to the program itself, the gas flare commercialization program itself, if we're going to see a drop in associated gas production as a result of what is happening on the crude oil side? So perhaps Modele, you can comment on that first.
Thanks, Rolake, again. That's an extremely valid question. I don't expect any short-term immediate impact to the bilateral contracts between gas commercialization companies like myself and those in which we've gone into agreements with, because initially there won't be that much of a shutdown of wells. I think the real issue for oil companies will be storage. I think they will be reluctant to cut down production or shut down wells because of what it takes to ramp them up again. Ultimately though, from a perspective of planning, there definitely is likely to be an impact. I can't speak on their behalf, and I imagine that it will also be in talks with the Nigerian gas flaring program, but they also have commitments to some certain level. I think one of the benefits of the industry is the long-term engagements that we go into because of the huge investments that have to be made. A lot of these agreements are long-term. However, there is some level of I'm not a lawyer, but there's some level of a force majeure in place, in that there are going to be people that say, well, I promised, but I can't. Well, I said I would, but I can't. And that may impact the flaring program. It may impact those of us going into the agreements for associated gas. But then really what it speaks to at the end of the day is what I said earlier, and what the person who asked this question wants to hear, which is that the investment in non-associated gas has to increase. The way forward is to really tap into the huge resources of natural gas we have in this country is not through non-associated gas solely. It's through making that investment not through associated gas alone, making that investment in associated gas. There's the projects to back it up. There's the commerce to back it up. Falakemi spoke a lot on how dependent industries, homes are on power. Gas to power is a huge part of why some people like me are in this business, and other applications of natural gas. The market is there. It's one of the major things that actually could help us cushion this crisis that we're going into, because whilst there's definitely a reduction in the power requirement from factories and a lot of other businesses, there's also a rise in the need for power from residential consumers, from essential service providers. People are manufacturing masks everywhere I look. there's a new business that requires power that's popping up as a result of that crisis. I dare say I don't know a business that doesn't require power, and this crisis is birthing new businesses. So where we lose in one direction, we're going to gain in another. And to defend that, we definitely would seek the support as stakeholders of both the program, the government, and every other person involved to encourage. I think the IOCs will definitely may not have the same business case they've had before to invest in associated gas, but they are non-associated gas, but they certainly have another business case now.
Very much. And Justice, before you answer that first question, I'm going to throw in another one that complements that. Someone had asked whether there's plans to send the gas from the NGFCP program to GENCOs. So in addition to answering the question on associated gas, will some of the gas flares that's being monetized go to GENCOs under the program?
Okay, thank you very much, Rolake. Let me start with this question here. The Nigerian gas flare commercialization program is strictly market-driven. Market-driven in the sense that all the third-party investors who are now what we call qualified applicants that are going to submit their bids on or before the 4th of May next month are looking to utilize the flare gas to market products for different reasons. So it's not strictly for GENCOs or it's not strictly for power. So they have their own design on how they're going to utilize these gas that we hitherto have been flaring. So for instance, during the registration, when we have well over 800 interested parties, most of them will say they want to use it for fertilizers. Some of them want to use it for LPG. Some of them want to use it for petrochemicals and all of those. So it's not strictly for GENCOs as it were. But again, the GENCOs could perhaps serve as off-takers to these investors. And that is one thing that we did with the World Bank in terms of the market study that was sponsored by the International Finance Corporation. So we looked at the potential off-takers that will come to take these flare gas to market product that will come from the NGFCP. And remember, we created a lot of incentives where we tend to distort the flare gas, the gas price. So for the NGFCP, our floor price for the gas is 25 cents per thousand scope for onshore flare gas. For swamp locations is 15 cents per thousand scope, and then for offshore is 10 cents per thousand scope. That is the cheapest you can get anywhere in the world. So what this means is that the flare bidders that will eventually become permit holders that will go into producers' acreage to take this gas will do a net back analysis to say, what product am I going to distort? Am I going to displace? Is it diesel? Where do I take my product to? So this is where they begin to look at the potential off-takers.
Thank you very much for those contributions. Justice, very interesting around the economics, depending on what location you are from a geographic perspective. So, I mean, just to Mr. Inouye, we've heard some of the challenges and the opportunities in the space. And I'm seeing a lot of questions here on NLNG Train 7. I think we've already answered those at the top of the hour, so we're not going to flog that particular horse. But all this is well and good. Can you give us a sense of whether Nigeria's financial sector is actually ready to cater for the gas business, to provide support along the power sector value chain, or even to understand what it takes to finance and scale renewable energy projects? It would be good to hear a bit from the financial service perspectives. Are banks lending now? Should we be looking at other types of investors to help build and scale these projects? I wondered whether we could hear some of your thoughts.
Okay, all right, thank you. Let me first begin by saying that the financing of oil and gas projects have two distinct characteristics. Usually they are huge in size. I mean, it's not 100 million naira project that we're talking about. Some instances we're talking about billions. The second thing is that they have long tenure. In other words, it's not like you're buying provisions today, selling tomorrow, and collecting money. No, they're huge projects in terms of capital outlay, and they take a long time. So they have a long repayment period. They have a long tenure. So that's the first thing that I want all of us to understand. The second thing is this. because of these reasons, the question then arises, was the Nigerian financial system able to cater to these needs? I would say to a certain extent, very much so. Today, the largest exposure of Nigerian banks, incidentally, is to oil and gas. And this is natural. I mean, it follows the dollar. Anywhere, the driver of your economy is where most of the money goes to. So it is not surprising, therefore, that the largest exposure of banks in Nigeria is to oil and gas. So do we have the financial depth? I think so, to some extent, not to all extent. The devaluation of the Naira, the capital size of Nigerian banks, our ability to draw money from external sources are constraining factors. But to me, if an idea is viable, rational economics will tell me to invest in it. So I don't see any constraint, therefore, in terms of our ability to attract capital from outside, whether from banks or export guarantee agencies, etc., provided the underlying projects are viable and the environment is good enough. The third element is about competence. Are the operators competent enough to handle this kind of financings and in an area or in an industry that is fairly complex? I would say yes. Can we scale up? Yes. I was really surprised recently to realize the kind of skills and competence that we have in the banking industry around risk analysis, risk management, financial structuring for oil and gas projects. Can we do more? Yes, we can do more in terms of our financial depth, in terms of our ability to attract foreign capital, and in terms of our ability to manage lending to the industry. But yes, I think we can.
Thank you very much for those submissions, Mr. Inoa. So there is capacity in our banking sector to do some of those projects, but we obviously need to partnerships and ensure bankable structures. Just thinking through some of the more specific financial elements, perhaps this is also a question, and I'm throwing this out there actually, maybe this is actually a general question for all the panelists. Someone asked on the Q&A around the FX mix mismatch. We're obviously facing a situation now where people are worried about further Naira devaluation in the economy. And the bulk of what we produce and export, we earn it in dollars. So for instance, if you take somebody who is in the gas business, you're buying your gas perhaps in dollars, but your end receipts through the value chain are coming in Naira. How can entrepreneurs and developers in this space, and perhaps same with renewable energy projects, I think this is relevant to all parts of the value chain. And I don't know who would like to have a go here. Perhaps we can also start with Mr. Inoa, and maybe also Justice, hear your thoughts about how you're trying to support operators and companies in this space around this whole FX mismatch issue, and some of the others can also chip in.
So let me, I didn't think too much about this, so forgive me if my answer is very short indeed. So classic response in currency mismatch is to hedge. You buy your dollars or your Naira forward, depending on what your currency of receipt is and what your currency of expenditure is. The second thing that I think one could do is to have a price regime that, well, that again depends on the market, but to have a price regime that takes into account the exchange rate volatility and compensates for it. And what I mean here simply is that you price your products or services in such a way that as much as is possible, you are able to convert that local currency into sufficient amount of dollars to pay your dollar liability, right? Again, I must admit that the second consideration, which is the pricing, is dependent on a lot of things, competition, government regulations, etc. But the two things that readily come to my mind, really, is just some kind of hedging, by buying your foreign currency forward, and therefore you have a certainty as to how much your exchange rate is going to be, what you'll be paying for the dollar. And then secondly, you do a pricing that reflects that volatility and covers your dollar liability.
Thank you very much. Justice, I don't know whether you had any responses to that or any contributions.
No, that's basically the same line of thought.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, so that's it.
Okay, thank you. So if there are no other contributions on that particular FX question, I think we can move on. I see that our time is fast spent. But with the kind permission. Okay, hi.
I was just going to just say something about the FX, the volatility, because I mean, every sector, and of course the renewables, because the entire value chain of the equipment used for power projects is actually FX dependent, because we import almost everything. But so what I would like to say is, so there are policies and there are incentives, so we need the government to begin to enforce some of those incentives in terms of having like tax holidays, rebates and all that. And my own take to any private developer right now is, please do not take any dollar denominated financing. If you're going to have any consolidated loan or any source of financing, ensure that you're working with a Nigerian bank who is able to ensure that there is a parity between your inflow and your receivables, so you need to have a Nigerian bank in the middle, because today we have a lot of donor agencies willing to give financing in dollars, and that your receivable is in naira, so you need to have some sort of leverage to cushion that effect and to ensure that the volatility, and of course you need to also ensure that your tariffs at the end of the day are a bit cost reflective, so that's what I have to chip in.
Thank you very much for that contribution. If there are no more submissions around the FX issue, I think this is a good time. Okay, sorry. Please go ahead.
I just thought I wanted to just reiterate for my audience especially, because we are the last foot of the chain and our tariff is in naira, and a lot of our infrastructure, transformers for example, they're not made here, they're imported. And if I'm selling in naira based on what has even happened with devaluation, and right now in the tariff model is at 1 to 197, and I have dollar at this rate and I can't increase tariff, and I have to continue to supply my customers and continue to improve performance. I spoke about metering. Even that impacts even metering, because metering is also not manufactured here. Even for those that are assembling them in Nigeria, some of the components are imported, which is dollar-based. So it has an impact on the discos. So it's important that my customers and the consumers understand the implication. And when we speak about a cost-reflective tariff and the reason why this tariff issue has to be looked at end to end, it must be based on commercial parameters. Simple, it is a business. And if you expect a certain level of service, then it for the investors and the stakeholders. I just thought I should really reiterate that on this platform.
Thank you very much for that very fascinating angle, Folakemi. I hope it really helps everybody to contextualize this issue. So we've run past the time, so I'm just actually going to ask each of our panelists to give their closing statements. And in giving your closing statements, I would also like you to briefly speak to your thoughts, just your own opinions on global events, particularly because, with what is happening with OPEC, the prices are still tanking and efforts to kind of protect the market haven't really worked. So things could even get worse from today. So the question to you all is, what will your business or your space look like once we're through the worst of the season? And if you have any parting thoughts, for those of you who want to put your crystal ball into the future, feel free to be specific. I'm going to go around, and I would like to start with Modele on the closing statements. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for a lot of the information I got as well out of this was very helpful for me. Thanks Rolake for the very insightful questions. I'm going to take it from where some of us left off, which was on the cost reflective tariff. I think it's very important to open up the market and free it up to allow to incentivize investors to come into the industry. The industry we're dealing with are very capital intensive, and there's no beginning for them if people do not see profit at the end of it. So forcing down regulation and barriers to entry, such as obligations to sell a product below the cost of that product, is only going to discourage investment in that industry. And that investment really is the beginning of the value chain. It starts off, it's the reason why you have these huge debts being owed by every single party in the value chain, because at some point, the person paying for the product is not actually paying the right price for the product. This is what sets us apart from our international other countries outside of Nigeria. While the oil prices did crash very dramatically and the gas prices are following behind, they actually were a lot more of a shock absorber than the oil sector. And this is because the demand for power didn't crash as drastically as the demand for oil. And the reason for that is because while we reduced power on some hand, in an effort to become technology ready, to digitize, automate, remote control, scatter systems, these are all power consuming elements. Even if there's a new normal where we'll not be doing things the same way we were doing things, there's still people who are running. When we start the flaring program, the sites are in multiple different locations, which will mean gathering all these different information, which is a lot. It's heavy in technology and heavy in remote monitoring. And these are all power consumers. So there is a huge good story and a huge narrative for gas to power in this country. It just takes stakeholders realizing that, if you let the market fly free, everybody will benefit, everyone, right down from the lowest people in the sector to the bigger players.
Thank you so much for those parting words, and closing statements from Tolulokwe, please. Thank you.
All right. Okay. From my part, from everything that we've heard today, and just thinking about post-COVID, what I would like to just drop with is that the vision for Nigeria is not going to change because it is. It's energy is the driver for an economic prosperity, and by 2030, our long-term ambition still remains the same, regardless of what we're seeing today and how things might end up being difficult. So what I would want to just share is that we need to digitize. We need to continue to seek and deploy smart energy. And post-COVID, you will also see energy efficiency. By the time the discos begin to charge cost-reflective tariff, it means that there will be no point and there will be no room for power for electricity wastage. So we're going to see a lot of energy efficient deployment and innovation. We are going to be in a lower for longer regime, meaning that we're going to have to seek economies of scale and seek the cheapest and the lowest source of energy to use at any point in time. And my last take for every investor, every Genco or distribution company is we need to diversify. This is giving us, this COVID pandemic is enough opportunity and is making it glaring that we all need to diversify the energy source, and it's time for an energy transition. The government is currently embarking on having 37 federal universities off grid. I think this is a very good initiative and we need to ramp it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tolulokwe, and the information on the federal universities. So, Justice, your closing statements, please.
Okay. First, I want to say COVID-19 is real, and irrespective of the lockdown that we've experienced in most parts of the world and the impact on the economy, there will still be gas demand. That is a given. You can't change that. Now, and our gas demand in Nigeria will increase because that is what we use for power generation, and of course to run some of our industries and manufacturing in a factory that are essential services to keep things going. Another thing I want to say, government is not doing this alone, and we're open to working with the different stakeholders to make sure that we create an enabling environment. So what the present government is doing, and again, taking a cue from the Honorable Minister of State, is running an open door policy, and he's had a lot of wide consultation with across the ecosystem, covering the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream, and of course the end users on how to make things easier for the common man. The other bit I want to mention, listening to the benefit of renewables. I'm not opposed to renewables. I'm a sustainability professional. But the point, what we need to understand is that renewables will not power everything that we need. It provides only 25%. So what happens to the remaining 75%? What that means is that we should begin to fall back to oil and gas, and in particular, the cleaner fuel, which is gas, the fuel for the future. And this is what we have in abundance as opposed to tiny droplets of oil that we have in the country. Now, on the part of the gas flare commercialization, it's ongoing. There's no stopping it. And I would like to make a statement here. Now, what we do with the design of the gas flare commercialization, because of what we know in terms of infrastructural deficit in country, we're looking at the long-time construction of stretched along the pipelines, which is a preferred method for transmission of natural gas. We found out as during the feasibility that you could actually deploy scalable, skid-mounted, plug-and-play kind of technologies, including virtual pipelines, where we can move natural gas to remote locations, as being done by some companies in Nigeria. So the NGFCP is looking to deploy these technologies that are in commercial applications, and that is what we scrub over 45 technologies with a World Bank group that is supporting the program. And then I remember that there was going to be a question around data analytics. Now we have a whole lot of raw data that we receive from producers. And what we try to do with data analytics is that we try to sieve this raw data and try to create a trending and of course the metrics to make sure that we have what we call an investment grade data for these qualified applicants and third parties to take to the bank. So that makes the NGFCP a bankable project. So the NGFCP will take care of this, and of course, distort what we've been having in country in terms of gas pricing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justice. Very comprehensive. Folakemi, your closing statements, please.
Thank you very much, Rolake. I'd first like to thank the Women in Energy Network for the opportunity to be able to speak on this platform. I'm very grateful, and I don't take it for granted. I would like to also thank the audience that took their time out to, come and listen to us and the very insightful questions that have come forth, and of course the other panelists. I think COVID has shown that power is critical to the country and is critical, obviously, to the economy. And we can only succeed if we use technology and technology to improve the services that we're offering our customers. I'd like to use this opportunity to also reiterate some of the things that Lagos State is doing. So Lagos State is partnering with us to ensure that they can increase power to consumers that are living in densely populated areas who can't really afford power at this time. That is key. I also want to use this opportunity to thank the regulators, CN, to thank all the stakeholders on the value chain, because the truth is that we cannot achieve some of the things we've achieved even during this COVID period, especially, for example, TCN, the energy that we're wheeling out. If we didn't have their support and collaboration at this time, we would not have been able to achieve same. I also want to use the opportunity to thank staff of Ikeja Electric, who have worked extremely hard. This season, we've worked as a team. I'll share two things. The team members, everybody in Ikeja Electric has called me up and have asked for names of customers that they can call out themselves to ask them or to tell them about how they can make payment. That shows that they're interested in the organization and in the success of the organization. And I want to use the opportunity to thank them for all the hard work and the commitment they've made. The technical team members are out there in the sun, day and night, ensuring that they can clear faults, regardless of the safety issues involved. So I think there's an opportunity for me to also shout out to them and say big thank you to them for their support. And of course, to my customers. At the end of the day, they're the reasons why we're in business. Customer first, customer first. And I want to use the opportunity to appeal to you if we're not being as responsive, but I'm committing to you today. Our job and our focus is to improve the power that we're providing to you and to ensure that we listen to you. We listen to you and would improve the services and how responsible we are to you on a daily basis. Thank you very much. I thank also my board, my directors, and who have also supported us in this time that we've had liquidity issues. They have had to give us soft loans, obviously, to pay for some of the operations that we had to embark on this time. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those shout outs, Folakemi. I'm sure your stakeholders will appreciate it. And finally, to Mr. Inuwa, parting words for us. Last but by no means least, what are your thoughts?
Okay, thank you very much. I thought I was second to the last, actually. I didn't know that everybody had spoken. So because perhaps I belong to several industries, let me make my comments general. And to say this, I think if there was any one single development in as long as we can remember that has disrupted the whole world and that will spew all kinds of reactions and actions going forward, it is this COVID-19 thing. But importantly, I think COVID-19, as horrible as it is, also provides us with two things to ponder. One, and this is something that has that has been mentioned throughout this conversation: environment, 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 enabling environment. So I would be really, really glad if COVID-19 and all the disruptions, etc., in supply, in demand, in pricing, in revenues, in lockdowns and lockups, I'll be really happy if COVID-19 further accentuates the need and the urgency in policy origination and policy implementation that will help us really make our environment so able as to attract investments from everywhere and to minimize risks and deliver returns to whoever it is that has undertaken that investment risk. But I think it is also an opportunity for us to, given the lessons, to domesticate the usage of gas on the back of an enabling environment. Domestication in expanded petrochemical plants, in additional power generation, in gas to liquids, and in fertilizer production, etc. The second area is what I will call follow the value. Something happened in Saudi Arabia about a year and a half, in fact less than a year. They floated part of Aramco on the Saudi stock exchange. Why they did that was simple. They wanted to collect income today so that they could use it to diversify their economy. Because they know that going forward, fossil fuels may not have the kind of value and market that they have today. Now we have an opportunity to do the same thing and more. Maybe the last point, or second to the last point, is to say that this situation has provided us with an opportunity to have an expansive ambition, to be ambitious in terms of how we can use the energy resources that we have over and beyond Nigeria. So I'm looking forward to a modular gas being used to provide power by Folakemi in Sudan or in Ethiopia. It is possible. It is possible. And honestly speaking, we're getting to a stage whereby we have to create markets. And that's essentially what I'm doing, what I'm saying. And then finally, is we have an opportunity to further integrate, quite apart from the good work that is being done by the Nigerian Content Management Board. We have an opportunity to further integrate our domestic economy to the oil and gas industry. Once we have more domestication of technology, we have a lot of capital coming from within, and we have a lot of plans and facilities being developed and being started here. To that extent, we have more jobs, we develop skills, and we create wealth. Finally, let me thank, like everybody else, the management and all the membership of Women in Nigeria, Women in Energy Network, for giving us the opportunity to participate in this. Certainly has been very, very revealing to me. I've learned so much from everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Inuwa, and you've made my job summarizing the discussion very, very easy with your very silent and succinct points. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. It's often said that Nigeria is probably a gas-producing country with a bit of oil. Hopefully, this will be a reality very soon. I'd like to thank my panelists for their efforts, their contributions, and the expertise. We are very grateful for your time. And to our audience, we're sorry we couldn't take all the questions, but we hope we answered your concerns and helped you inspire some hope in your businesses and your endeavors going forward. To the WIN leadership and membership, we're grateful for the platform. Please follow us, engage with us, join WIN. The details are on screen now. The video from this webinar will also be available to all those who were able to register. Thank you very much again. Stay safe, and we look forward to seeing those of you interested in the downstream panel on Monday, the 27th of April. It will be a very engaging discussion and very passionate insights from our panelists. Thanks again, stay well, and see you soon.